for the sharing and what I've learned here. I'm going to go ahead and read a passage from the book of Revelation, the 23rd chapter, which is the culmination of the Scripture. It's the very end of the Bible. And the Apostle John, who saw these things unfold, recorded what he witnessed. And he said, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them as their God. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away.' And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'See, I am making all things new.' And he also said, 'Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true.' Then he said to me, 'It is done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. Those who conquer will inherit all these things. I will be their God, and they will be my children.'" Amen. You know, it's not possible to wrap up a man's life, let alone Dave's life, in an hour and a half, or even later this afternoon. So this is just a little reflection of the impact that Dave has had. I would encourage you, if you hadn't had a chance to read the obituary yet, the family did such a great job on that. And I'll tell you, every time I learn more and hear more, my instinct is to want to know Dave better, because what I've learned just sort of, it's a blessing. It's intriguing, but certainly we can't really explain it, even begin, to tap Dave's life and the influence and the impact he had on so others. But I would say, even for those, and there may be some of you here who barely knew him at all, and might be here out of respect for some of the other family members, here's the thing: if you never got to meet the person and know what they were like, you can tell by the influence they left. Just like a great ship that you didn't see, you can tell it was a great ship by the wake that was left behind. When a tornado will rip through a town, and afterward the experts who would judge the size and the power of that tornado, if they're uncertain when it goes through, they look at the impact it left, and they can say what level of tornado that was from the wake from what was left behind. So if you never knew Dave, or you didn't know him well, didn't have the opportunity, I would say you might learn a lot from the impact and the influence and the legacy that is left behind. And for me, it's been such a joy. One of the great blessings I have as a pastor is I get to have a peek behind the curtain. I get invited in and to learn things. And here's my great desire in being with Danny and the family, and hearing these stories as a pastor, particularly for young people. What I would love you to see and know and hear and experience is, let me tell you, this is how it's supposed to be. I got to meet Dave some years ago, is on D-Doc. Ed McComb had asked if we could do a Bible study there, because some of you who may know the boating culture is not necessarily the same as the church culture, a little bit different. And he said, a lot of these men don't go to church, and can we do a Bible study? I said, sure, we do a Bible study. So I went out on D-Doc, and the group had gathered, and there weren't many Bibles there at those first few meetings, and so we were just sort of sharing and learning about each other. And I invited Dave McBrayer to come and help, because Dave's a wonderful Bible teacher. And when I said to him, as we've been meeting for some weeks, I said, I don't know how long it's going to be before we actually break open a Bible. We're not even close to that yet. But here's what happened is, one by one, those men would show up with their new Bibles and their study Bibles, and then we would see them poring over that. Because here's the thing with men like Dave, and there's not many men like Dave. There's an old definition of what theology is, and that definition is theology is faith seeking understanding. It's a classic definition of theology. Faith seeking understanding. Let me tell you, that was not Dave's journey. Not in any way, shape, or form. It was the opposite. It wasn't faith seeking understanding. It was a man of intelligence and wit and brilliance and engineer's mind who said, I'm seeking understanding to see if faith makes any sense at all. And because ultimately, for a man like Dave, if faith makes any sense at all, there's one test from an engineer: it better work. And so what surprised me is meeting Dave. He'd sit there with the Bible, and you can tell this humility about him, this honesty and this seeking. See, I would have guessed from past experience and seeing a man who was that humble and that reflective, I would have thought, my guess would be here's another man who's made a mess of his life, probably made a mess of his marriage and his family and his business or whatever. I couldn't have been more wrong. Dave wasn't seeking understanding so that he could fix the mess he made. He was seeking this to see if it was true or real or not. He had an awesome marriage and a great family. And it was a model for a lot of people who would be Christians. But here's the thing is that, I'm sorry, as people who would desire to have faith, we so often get in the way in the church. And pastors so often get in the way. And we put up these roadblocks and barriers and understanding the reality that it's all about relationship. And yet, Dave was a smart guy. And I love hearing stories about the hunting and the fishing and the boating, and as well as he did his business. But ultimately, what matters most in all those things is relationship. And that's not only the essence of faith, but that relationship that we're called to have, like a marriage with the Lord, is meant for our spouses, our families, our communities. And so Dave didn't need to find his faith to learn how to love his wife or his children. He was great at that. But it gave it a greater meaning. And it gave an understanding of a purpose that nothing ends here. And so to see Dave week after week and read his Bible and taking notes and asking questions and seeking, and he went on a couple of men's retreats with us. You can tell he was always moved by that experience. I could see how the Spirit was working in him. And that is a legacy. That's a legacy that goes on through generations. And I'm here to tell you, I don't believe in any way, shape, or form. There's not a cell in my body that thinks it was God's will that Dave left as early as he did. I don't think that was God's will at all. You can quibble with me, we take that conversation up, and I will win it. But if you want to raise that question, I'll be glad to tackle that. I don't believe that was God's will. I don't think it was God's will that Dave got sick either. No more so than I think it was God's will that somebody would abandon a child or their brakes wouldn't work and they get into an accident. Things happen. But the Lord has a solution for that, because he can fix anything that we mess up, or any illness or sickness or any relationship. But that doesn't mean that though Dave's life was way too short, that he can't have an impact for all eternity through this awesome family. By the way, Callie doesn't look like her mom. She's got the brains of her mom and dad. It's been such a joy in being around and seeing the effort. I tell you, in the time I've had to spend with a family, there has not been one single selfish moment of this family going through this and planning how they want to honor their husband, their dad, brother, son. There was a book written years ago which meant so much to me. It was a golf magazine writer named James Dodson. And James' father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he knew his time was short. And James' dad was so much like not just a mentor and a leader and a dad, but a calming influence, a man who just seemed to take things in stride, a man who just seemed relaxed in the storm, knew how to have a good time. Meant a lot like Dave Jordan. And so James Dodson wanted to spend time with his dad, and so they went to Europe and played golf together. And so for these last weeks, he was just tapping into the wisdom of his dad and trying to learn from that. something that would carry on afterward. And so finally his dad passed away, and one night, in the middle of the night, James Dodson woke up and he was in a panic because he was afraid he could not remember the sound of his father's voice. And it panicked him. And somehow he might have forgotten what his dad's voice sounded like, and it troubled him deep into his soul. And a short time after this, he was with his daughter on the putting green. And they were up to the paces, and he was giving his daughter instructions. And at one point, as he's talking to her, and very often as a parent is speaking to the child, and our desire to teach them is far greater than their desire to learn. His little girl turned to him, turned to his dad, and said, "You sound just like Grandpa." And he realized his dad's voice lived in him. I'm here to tell you, David's gone way too soon. We still want him here desperately. And he fought to stay and be with his family and friends. But I'm also here to tell you, he doesn't need to study the Bible anymore, because he is walking with the living Word. And he wouldn't come back here now if he could, but he'll wait patiently for all of us. And his voice lives on. You. And everybody who's blessed by having that influence of being around him, and the serious man, engineered man of science, and also the silly man that we see in these photos. It's all Dave, and it's all glorious. And each one of these pictures, each one of these has a background story. I look at every one of them, I'm kind of curious as where they were, what they were doing. And those stories will go on forever, as long as his family and friends have gathered and sharing those memories. But there's something more important and greater that goes on. That's Dave. And I'm thankful to have known him. I wish I'd known him better. But I look forward to seeing him again. Let us pray. Lord, we just ask that you